Hi, I'm Mark Durban.
And I'm Rick Keppler. We'd like to begin by announcing that an exciting new book on Big Bear history is about to be released, called Big Bear Lake, The Struggle for Water, Land, and Power.
This highly documented new book by Charles Peckham talks specifically about the history of the lake, the surrounding land around the lake that the water company owned, and how it all evolved.
Commercial boat operations on Big Bear Lake began around 1910, when Captain Grant began operating tour boats for the Pine Knot Lodge.
Later in 1918, John Fisher's Pine Knot Company leased a couple of acres at the foot of Pine Knot Avenue and officially opened the Pine Knot Landing.
In 1921, the famous Stillwell's Resort was built by Carl and Mamie Stillwell, just east of the Pine Knot Landing.
Years later, in the 1930s, Carl Stillwell's son, Charlie, and his wife Ann took over the Pine Knot Landing, which then became the Big Bear Boat Landing.
About that same time, Charlie also formed a partnership with Eddie Yon from Lake Arrowhead to help improve and expand the landing.
Throughout the 1940s, under the management of Charlie and Eddie, a large boathouse and walkway pier were built. Docks were constantly being added and tour boats were brought in.
And because of its location at the village, business was good, and the Pine Knot Landing continued to grow and expand. This image shows Eddie Yon and his wife Ellie posing with a Big Bear boat landing crew.
In the background of this 1939 photo, you can see a swim beach on the east side of the landing. For many years, this beach was a popular attraction for both visitors and locals. Take a close look at this aerial photo of the Big Bear Lake boat landing from 1947. It shows 4 small boat slips at the north end of the landing. This is where Charlie and Eddie docked a highly popular fleet of 4 high-speed tour boats that they once operated on the lake back in the 1940s.
They originally started with just one boat, a 1929 26-foot Chris Craft custom runabout called Steppin Again. By 1945, they were operating a total of 4 Steppin Again high-speed boats, called 1, 2, 3, and 4, respectively.
However, the boat we are going to talk about is the original Steppin Again 1. This was Charlie Stillwell's favorite, and was by far the fastest of the 4 boats.
Later in the early 1950s, on a typical high-speed run down the lake with a load of tourists, the powerful aircraft engine blew up and punched a hole through the side of the boat.
After the motor was replaced, Charlie Stillwell had the hull repaired, painted black, and moved to the Magnolia Pier in Long Beach in 1953.
Eventually, it was auctioned off in the mid-1970s. This was when the difficult task of restoring the now seriously deteriorated boat began.
30 years after Steppin Again 1 was restored, it was brought back home to Big Bear Lake, when it was purchased by local Big Bear Lake historian Charles Peckham and his wife Barbara in 2012.
There is an interesting twist to this story. Back in 1950, entertainer Mel Blanc, the man of 1,000 voices, who had created all the voices for the Looney Tune characters, had a home in Big Bear Lake. He was also serving as honorary mayor of Big Bear Lake at the time. As seen here with his friends Ben Johnson on the left and on the right, Bill Knickerbocker and Jim Irwin.
Well, Mel had a son, Noel, who was about 12 or 13 years old. And it turns out Noel was one of the last people to ride in Steppin Again 1 on that fateful day when the motor blew up.
And as fate would have it, Noel was also one of the very first people to ride in Steppin Again 1 when it was finally returned to Big Bear Lake over 60 years later. As seen in this photo, with Noel Blanc on the left and owner Charles Peckham on the right.
In 2017, Steppin Again 1 made another appearance at the Big Bear Lake Boat Show, as seen here with owner Charles Peckham, author Rick Keppler, and myself, Mark Durban.
Also at that 2017 boat show, there were a couple of other Big Bear classic boats we would like to point out. This is Firecracker, a 1930s Chris Craft which has been cruising Big Bear Lake since 1942.
And here is Rick and I with Mel Blanc in its classic Bugs Bunny 2. This boat has also been on Big Bear Lake and in the Blanc family since the early 1950s.
We end this video with two views of the Pine Knot Landing. This is what it looked like in the 1940s.
And for many years, the Big Bear Lake Fire Department was located just west of the Pine Knot Landing.
And this is the same scene in 2017. And that's our look at Pine Knot Landing.
See you next time.